Tucker Carlson spoke to former Democratic Senator Patrick Kennedy about marijuana, and it was really, really stupid.
So I'm interested to hear your perspective on this. You're one of the only people, certainly one of the only Democrats, to say anything like this out loud. So I'd like to know what your reasoning is.
Well, we've been through the experience of this current opioid crisis, and everybody's pointing back to where Purdue Pharma marketed this very addictive OxyContin, and what was ending up happening is that public health got put to the sidelines while profits for Purdue Pharma ruled public health. It took over any debate as to the real impact of this drug overall on our nation. And then we go back a generation to the tobacco industry settlement and how we had to learn for a long time as to the fact that there was an addictive substance, nicotine, in tobacco that was driving commercial marketing of cigarettes. And so with all of that knowledge, why would we be surprised that if we have a new commercial push to push a product out called marijuana, that there wouldn't be a very deleterious impact on our public health, especially given the fact that we know with legalization really it means commercialization, which really means
But wait a second, Congressman. We know that the people who run the marijuana companies are very cool, progressive people. And they're not in this for the money. They're in it because they want to make the world a better place. So why don't you trust them?
Well, that's I think, the thing that we have to ask of ourselves. Are the billions of dollars now going into investing into cannabis and in the many products that are being produced? I might add elixirs, which are basically the old Fanta grape-aids and orangeades that we grew up with. Those are now being infused with marijuana-infused THC. Beyond just the brownies, the marijuana industry is now infusing gummy bears. They're infusing things like Pop-Tarts. Other food edibles is what they're known. In other words, this is a really slick, very smart marketing effort. If you have money on the line behind the marijuana industry, you're standing to gain a lot of money in the years ahead. And yet, who's going to be the biggest one to pay for all of this? It's going to be the public health that pays the cost of this. It's going to be young people who are going to think that this is an easy alternative for me to deal with my stress and anxiety, because now I've got all of these choices. I can drink it, I can smoke it, I can eat it, whatever will help me feel less anxious.
Yeah.
And frankly, Tucker, amidst this mental health and addiction crisis, it's shocking that we're not asking a more fundamental question. What are we doing to help our young people manage their stress, cope with their problems, navigate their anxieties? That should be the challenge on our country right now. And yet, I think we're selling our young people down the river by allowing a new predatory business that feeds off of addiction, that makes money off of getting people hooked. I think that's bad for the public health of this country.
I agree with you 100%. And by the way, I should note for our viewers who don't know that you personally overcame addiction to drugs and alcohol without the use of more drugs and alcohol, and you're a better man as a result of that. So congratulations to you, and thank you for your perspective on that.
I appreciate having me.
Oh, so that's where this comes from. This is one of those guys who himself was an addict, and so he personally starts taking the position of abstinence on all substances, and so he's got to be a closed-minded prick and act like that has to be the answer for everybody, and we should enforce it by law. What a douche. I think I found the worst Kennedy. Now, Tucker Carlson, he is, I should say, the darling of the millennial right wing. He gets some good ratings numbers, and he has a genuinely devoted following. And this was, of all the segments I've seen of his, this was by far and away the most disliked on YouTube. It was well over 50% dislikes when I saw it. And I think that says something, that millennial right-wingers are not with this, older generation right-wing position. They think it's fucking stupid. And Tucker Carlson backed the wrong horse on this issue, let's just say. So they compare it to the fucking opioid crisis. What a ridiculous comparison. If anything, this would help fight the opioid crisis. It wouldn't become its own opioid crisis. The opioid crisis is tied to overdose and deaths. Marijuana is not tied to overdose and deaths, okay? So this idea of like, hey, it's like in the opioid crisis, they put profits above all else, and like, that was the problem. And now, like, we're going to do the same thing for weed. It's going to be commercialized. Ugh. That's not an argument. That's not a point. Like, oh, it's going to be commercialized. And then what? Like, do you have a rest of that sentence? Do you have somewhere you're going with that? Because just bringing up the point that it's going to be commercialized is not an argument in and of itself. You know what else is commercialized? Energy drinks. You know what else is commercialized? Alcohol. And it's regulated, but it's commercialized. So a lot of things are commercialized. That doesn't mean it is wrong by its very nature. I would argue it's not. In fact, when you do legalize, tax, and regulate these products, what happens? You destroy the black market for these products. So during Prohibition, what happened? The mafia got incredibly powerful. Crime shot through the roof. Why? Because you banned alcohol, which means you put it on the black market, which means criminal gangs were the only people selling it, which means they got rich and powerful in the process. So if you legalize, tax, and regulate, what happens? Everything's all, on the up and up, and then when you have a problem, you solve it in court where businessmen wear suits and ties, as opposed to solving it in the streets with a fucking Uzi, you dipshits. And then, final point is, the age-old fucking dodge is what this is. What about the young people? Young people exist in the world. That is not a point. Yes, they exist. Alcohol is legal. Young people exist there too. And we still have regulations where they're not allowed to have it. Marijuana being legal, nobody's talking about let's legalize marijuana and let your toddler smoke it. Nobody said that. Nobody would say that. That doesn't make any sense. People say legalize, tax, and regulate. So let's legalize it, but hey, you're not allowed to smoke and drive. Hey, you're not allowed to have your fucking toddler smoke. They can't buy it. They can't possess it. Whatever. You can still have rules. And you can't take away all, adult accoutrements because kids exist. That's okay. So by that logic, porn exists in the world, and so do kids. Therefore, make porn illegal. Everybody would look at you and say, that's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. Why? Because that's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. So it's the same thing with marijuana. So, these guys who love to pretend, we care about freedom, bro. That's what we're all about freedom and liberty, woo! Unless it is the most basic test of those values. Of like, hey, should an adult be able to put in their body whatever they want to put in their body if they're not hurting anybody? No! Not that! When I say freedom, I mean freedom except for those things that are free that I don't like personally.